Reynatis caught a lot of people's attention when it announced the World Ends With You crossover, but is it enough to justify the purchase? I went into this game with a lot of doubts based on the visuals of the trailer, but slowly it's starting to win me over with its flashy combat and the aesthetic of the game. I'll dive into that though a little bit more during my final opinion in the pros and cons segment at the end of the video, but for now, let's discuss the story. Reynatis is primarily going to take place in modern-day Shibuya, Tokyo, where using your magic is policed by a government agency, and you're going to control two different parties of three that are going to belong to different factions. The first party we're going to discuss is going to be led by Marin, who's a stray wizard that's being recruited by an organization called Owl. So you're a stray wizard, and the other two members of your party come from the Owl organization. Now, in the world of Reynatis, I mentioned earlier that using your magic is policed, and so all of the wizards walk around in what is known as a suppressed state, but this game calls it the hoodie system. And so you have your state which is suppressed with your hoodie up, but then you can also swap to your liberated state where you're able to use your magic and your abilities. So this is lore related, and it also factors into the gameplay and combat, which we'll get into later, but every character has a liberated state and a suppressed state. It's not just something that the main character that you control primarily has. The other party that you're going to be able to control is going to be led by Sari and two other party members, and all three of them belong to an organization known as the MEA. Sari isn't the leader of the organization, she's just the primary person in the party that you'll be using in the story bits. But the MEA is the government agency that is policing and patrolling the streets to make sure that public order isn't being disrupted and trying to get magical drugs off the streets that are being provided by the third and final organization that you'll need to know, known as the Guild. And this is an organization that in the past attempted to protect Japan, but in modern day Japan, they're known as a terrorist group that is distributing a magical drug across the streets, and a group of wizards that are also headhunting and trying to kill members of the government agency MEA. Now, the magical drug that they're distributing is a big plot point to Reynatis, and essentially just think of this as like crack. That's the best similarity that I have to it. And so people are getting addicted to it, they are wanting more of it, and they're acting for better, like I don't know a better word, but they're acting like fiends to get more of it and to get that next hit. And when it comes to wizards, they have that drug within their body. So they're hunting down wizards to try and get more of that drug. But that's just like a quick spoilerless overview of what you can expect, the power dynamic and the story setup of Reynatis. Now we can move into discussing what really sold me on the game, and that's going to be the gameplay and combat. Let's start with the combat, since I feel like that is the highlight of this game to me. I mentioned earlier there's a liberated state and a suppressed state, and this also carries over into the combat. In combat, you're going to be able to use the liberated state, which is the only way that you're able to deal out damage. When you're in this liberated state, you're going to have a meter that's constantly draining, and you're going to be able to use different abilities that deal damage that take chunks of that meter. Once that meter hits zero, you're forced into your suppressed state. Now, in your suppressed state, you're not going to be able to dish out any damage. The only thing that you can do is dodge abilities. But it's not just simple dodging like other games. In your suppressed state, it's going to slow down all projectile moves to give you a chance to dodge. But when you're up close and you're getting a direct hit, you're going to have a chance to time if you hit this circle exactly on the money once it finishes. That's going to allow you to do a perfect dodge. When you do that perfect dodge, you're going to jump out of the way, you're going to get a massive chunk of your meter back. So when I first read about this, I thought it was going to be a little bit clunky, but I feel like that is what brings this game to life. Being able to like instantaneously swap between your liberated and your suppressed state allows you to just go crazy in combat. The strategy isn't necessarily to just be in your liberated state until your meter runs out. The overall game plan is going to be fighting in your liberated state. As soon as you see that enemy looking to make a move against you, at the last minute swapping to your suppressed state, getting that perfect dodge in, and continuing that flow to continuously build up your meter so you're never forced into your suppressed state. I think the way that this is executed just allows you to feel like you are untouchable within combat, and you just really feel like an anime character, and it allows you, once you get a few hours under your belt, to just become a pro and just never be touched. Now, you may see some footage where I'm getting destroyed, and that was before I learned how to effectively use this system, because if you don't effectively use this system, You're gonna be running around like an idiot like I am here because I have no more meter. But once you get the hang of it, you're gonna be taking down bosses with ease. There is a decent bit of difficulty, so I'm not saying that the game is easy with this system, but it makes combat just feel so satisfying when you're able to just kind of stand there and just weave, attack, you know? It's just so satisfying, and I just feel with like that techware aesthetic that I'm just this untouchable badass that no one can hang with. Each character also is going to play differently, so they each have those same core elements with the suppressed and liberated state, but they're going to have different abilities that they use within both of those states and weapons. You can also hit R2 during combat to swap to another character. The character is going to stay on the screen that you swapped from and continue to dish out abilities for you to combo with before they jump off and go away, and you only have that one unit on the screen. In addition to all that, you're going to have triangle and circle, which are going to be like your abilities, and then you're going to have L3, I believe is what you use to let it off, and that's going to be your ultimate ability. If you guys enjoy these detailed JRPG reviews, make sure that you're subscribing to the channel and helping me get this video to 100 likes. I really would appreciate it, but let's get back into discussing the game. Now let's go ahead and discuss a few unique mechanics to Reynatis. When you're playing as Marin, if you get into any type of disputes or combat where you have to go into your liberated state and fight, you're going to be on a system where it's like a trending. And once you go number 1 trending, the MEA or the government organization is going to come after you. So after every battle, you have to immediately swap back to your liberated state, or excuse me, your suppressed state, and then find a hiding area to cool down. So it's kind of like the GTA system where you have the stars and then the police come after you once you get a certain amount of stars, but you can hide to cool down. A few unique features that we can bang out are going to be the malice level and the stress level. When your malice level is high, there are certain things that are going to be restricted that you can't do, like find different abilities around the area. Some abilities are only going to be available if you have a low malice level, and this is just like the animosity towards wizards from the common folks of Shibuya. The next is going to be your stress level, and the higher stress you have is going to allow you to hit harder and be stronger, but once you get maxed out at 100% stressed, you're going to be forced to go into a liberated state, or excuse me, a suppressed state, to maintain your stress and lower it. And you're going to be able to lower it by doing different things around the world. I believe doing side quests and activities will lower your stress levels, but it is something that you want to kind of maintain and manage because you are getting those extra damage modifiers by having it high. You just don't want to have it maxed out. The enhancement system is pretty straightforward. The main thing is going to be the Wiz Arts, and so these are essentially abilities, but you can find new abilities around the world on places that are tagged up and have graffiti, and you can inspect them, and it's some lore related thing, I forgot what it's called, but they allow you to unlock new Wiz Arts, which are different abilities that you can equip to your character. You can only have 2 equipped at once in your skill slots, and then I believe the abilities are going to be like more passive Wiz Arts, but every character has a different set that they come with by default, and then has access to change it with Wiz Arts that you find around the world. And this is also going to persist across both parties, whether it be the Owl party with Marin or the MEA party with Sari. Now we can move into discussing the pros and cons of Reynatis. We're going to start with the pros like we always do. Let's build the game up before we get into anything negative. And I think the biggest highlight of this game for me is going to be the combat. I'm already having fun with the combat, and I know that as I get more abilities and I get more fluent with like my hands going to the abilities to execute them, the combat is just going to get better and better to where I just feel so satisfied by just pulling off combos and doing these perfect dodges to perfectly execute and just be untouchable and just feel like I'm a real life main character in a video game, and not just a main character by the context of the word, but main character in a sense that I'm a badass, I'm the one, I'm him, no one can touch me. The next pro for me is going to be the character aesthetic. I'm going to talk about it when we get to the cons when it comes to the graphic, but I feel like the character aesthetics and the combat are the 2 things that are pulling this game and carrying it. I like this like Japanese tech streetwear aesthetic that every character has in the design, and I feel like if you remove that particular element from the game just loses so much, and I feel like it would be a game that would go by unnoticed. But luckily, they knew to add this in, and this is one of the big things that caught my attention with the game and made me want to try it out, even though the graphics aren't really my cup of tea. And that follows into the other and final pro that I have, and that's going to be the World Ends With You collab. The aesthetic and the World Ends With You collab are the two visual things that I feel like are attracting a lot of the audience to want to try this game. And then once you get into the game, you start to play the combat, which through text to me feels and sounds a little, or reads a little bit clunky. But once you actually play the game, you're like, oh wow, this actually is very well executed. And so the two things that draw me in are complemented with the third thing being combat, which is like a random surprise out of nowhere that I think make for a strong set of pros. Now, when it comes to the World Ends With You collab, that there's a part in the story where the main cast plays the Reaper games. And then they showed this trailer where we get to see interactions between characters and the crossovers from both worlds. But I just want to reiterate, I don't know if it's DLC or the main game yet, just because I haven't progressed to that point. All right, now we can move into some of the cons. I'm gonna preface this by saying, if there's a game that I don't like, I just won't reach out to the developers or publishers to attempt to get a copy, just because I don't like the feeling of, if I get a copy, I'm gonna get the game and then I'm gonna have to tear it apart, and I'm also gonna have to invest time to play the game to do the review. So if it's a game that I don't think I'm gonna like, I'm just gonna skip it. Why, say something mean about a game that I knew that I probably wouldn't like to begin with? But I feel like Reynatis really teetered that line where I was like, I don't think I'm gonna like it, but I'll give it a try to see if I do. In hindsight, I'm glad I did, but let's start with the biggest factor of why I didn't want to try it at first, and that's gonna be the graphics. Reynatis is one of those games that looks a little bit better in person than it did in the trailers, which is why I'm glad that I gave it a try. And when they get like on their peaks and you see cutscenes like this, I am just amazed. And I wish that more of the cutscenes were animated like this. It really reminds me of Verum Rex from Kingdom Hearts 3. And so not all of the cutscenes are to that quality, unfortunately. But once you get like up close, you can see that like the models aren't necessarily the greatest, but they're serviceable enough. And when we get into the overall view, when you're just in the world and fighting with the aesthetic, I think that it's serviceable enough for me to have a good time, enjoy the story, enjoy the combat, and play it without necessarily being bothered by them not being the quality of like a new modern AAA game. The next con is that it's going to be a full-priced game. Now, me personally, if it was my money, I would probably add Reynatis to my wish list and then catch it in a few months when it's going to be on sale. I am not saying skip it, because I think that this game is definitely worth trying. And I think it's going to be a hidden gem of 2024 that no one is going to try, people are going to overlook. But I feel like what's hindering it a lot is the price and the fact that it's releasing in this window between a big set of heavy hitters. We have Visions of Mana, which just came out, and then a few weeks later we have Metaphor ReFantasio, and then a month after that we have Dragon Quest III HD 2D Remake, whatever it's called. So that's a crazy lineups of games that I think are going to take attention away from Reynatis, which is why I say you might be safe skipping it, coming back to it in a few months once your backlog is a little less hectic, and by then it's going to be on a decent sale for you to save some money. These are my thoughts on Reynatis, but if you want to hear my opinion on a few other JRPGs, feel free to check out this video right here where I dive into Visions of Mana. Thank you guys for your time, and I'll catch you in the next one.